Awesome. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Industry Chats with Affixify. I am so excited today to welcome Jody Jacobson, industry expert, consultant, runs her own business, has a team. And honestly, I'm excited because Jody, you are the implementation expert, and we talk so much on these chats about choosing tech, but actually implementing it correctly is a whole other animal. So before we get into all of that, we want to welcome everyone today. We go live every Wednesday at noon Central to talk about industry topics around technology typically. And Jody, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you and tell us about yourself before we jump in today?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited. Um, so I've been in hospitality for almost 20 years. I started in on the hotel side, working with a hotel management company for 10 years. I started in accounting and then moved into analytics and operations, did all different things, and then ultimately was the corporate director of finance when I left. So yeah, I love numbers, I love tech. So then I actually moved into implementing. So 10 years on the implementation side, mostly implementing accounting and BI systems.
Okay.
So working with different properties, learning Usali integrations, and just got a much deeper understanding of implementations and what's needed to make them successful. So
That is phenomenal. You have such a cool background, and you also have a really cool location situation because you get to visit both Europe all the time and be in the United States, right? So
yeah,
I'm a little
so I
jealous
do.
of that setup.
Yeah, I do go between, which is nice. Well, it's a blessing and a curse with the time zones.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yes. Yeah, you probably have some pro tips by now. We'll have to talk about some time on jet
yeah.
lag.
Just get up at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're in the States, and then it transfers. There's no jet lag.
Yeah. Brilliant. I like to be up early anyway. So
Yeah.
four's pushing it. 5 is my ideal time. So
Mhm.
so awesome. Well, you have so much experience. And what I love is that you have a lot of on-property corporate hotelier experience too. So what I wanted to talk about, and actually I told you this, I don't even want to talk that much because I just want to like hear your knowledge today. But you come in, you help hoteliers implement this tech. I think it's a very powerful concept that you can buy awesome tech. We hear the term tech stack. I think it's almost abused at this point, but we hear it all
Yeah.
the time. But then they're like, adoption is low or this doesn't make sense. And so in comes Dr. Jody and team to diagnose and fix. So what are the challenges that you see? Like when you come in the door, what are you seeing hoteliers facing when they're trying to implement these purchases that may be corporate made or whoever?
Yeah, and so ultimately I'd like to come in before the problem
Yeah.
arises just to help get the plan together. But a lot lately it's just been a lot of, hey, we've been trying to implement this, and we don't have user adoption. Everybody's still
Mhm.
doing things manually,
Right.
and or it's taken like a really long time to get the system implemented. The biggest thing I think is that the failure to understand the complexity of installing a new system. So,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing like a big system, so like a PMS system or an accounting system, you don't do those often. I read
Right.
that stat is like every 5 to 10 years. So it's not something that you're doing that often, and it's can be
Yeah.
hard to understand how complex it is, which then adds to unrealistic expectations. You don't have enough resources, you don't have the right resources, you're adding uh, regular job, or you're adding another job onto somebody who already has a full-time job.
Yeah.
And implementing a system can be sold as an easy process, but it's not flipping a switch. So you need to make sure that you have a good plan, you have the right people, you're giving them enough resources, and that you have the right people in the room when you're selecting that tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because yeah, if you are missing your end users, or somebody who has a big part in using that system, but you don't ask them, what's your biggest challenge, or what do you absolutely need in the next system, then you can be going through the implementation process, and all of a sudden you get into training and your users are like, well, this doesn't help me with my job, I'm missing these pieces. And I've seen companies actually have to delay go live and go back and spend more money, take more time, add additional resources, because they didn't have those initial conversations with
Right.
their end users. So
Wow. Well, and
yeah.
I think I mentioned this last week on our live session with Ira Vuk, who is an industry author and consultant as well. And I was saying I had a call with a group of hotels back in the fall, and they were revamping multiple parts of their chosen technologies, and they were only like 12 months out from their last technology purchases, and they literally said it was kind of a rush process, and we have to now go back because we realized we didn't put enough effort, time, everything we needed because they're busy. And I thought, like, that blew my mind, but that's got to
Mhm.
be something you're seeing somewhat often then, is that initial step of due diligence maybe isn't taken as seriously.
Yeah, and it's hard because you're balancing new technology with also having a budget. Like you have a budget, you have these numbers that you can use. This is what your ROI is going to be. And the first thing that I see, unfortunately, that gets taken out of the budget is training and your upfront resources, which
Right.
those two things are huge when you're implementing. If you don't have the resources to get things started, to get things mapped, to get your data
Right.
migration, to do your testing, and then to do the training, you just end up spending more money.
Yeah.
And it seems like the easiest things to cut out of the budget are the training and the resources, but then you see it in the back end. And
Yeah.
you know I I would love to not come in, or to not have to come in and fix things, because I know that we, like, hotels are on such a limited, like, our margins are so limited that
Right.
you don't want to have to spend that extra money.
Yeah, no, that's so, and you probably almost end up spending so much more when you have to backtrack and redo things than maybe if you just kind of, like, to your point, you want to be involved before the
Yeah.
tech stack is chosen so that you can make sure it's all done correctly.
Yeah, or just help with your plan. Make sure that you understand, like, this is what your ROI is. This is what your plan should be.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So, when you're looking at, obviously you mentioned like a big tech implementation, but what about multiple implementations? So do you in either on, and I think my connectivity is not loving me today. I'm so sorry, guys, but do you ever come in and help choose multiple systems, or what have you seen? Does that add a layer of complexity when you're implementing multiple systems?
So it does add a layer of complexity when you're doing multiple systems. I mean, I've seen people do 5 systems at a time, which I would never suggest, but it
Wow.
it, it needs to be a phased approach, uh, because if you're trying to do multiple things at once, you're spreading your resources even thinner. So if you are doing multiple things at once, what I would do is create like a phased approach. Like,
Right.
look at it,
Okay.
like the dates that work for everyone on the team. Because if you don't, then you can end up really having different resources who need to be working on 2 different systems, and then neither system really gets completed to
Yeah.
its full capacity, because everybody's strained. And then you're like, well, I have these deadlines to hit, and I have my regular job. So it just it make it overcomplicate it not overcomplicates. If you don't have a phased approach and a really good understanding, and the different roles assigned appropriately, it can make it really hard. And, like, if you're doing multiple systems at once, if you haven't talked about the integrations and how they're going to speak to each other, that can be another failure point. So, okay, I'm going to implement, a PMS, POS, and then an accounting system, but my PMS and POS system aren't talking to each other in the right way. So then the data is going into the accounting system and it just ends up being a mess. So making sure you have a phased approach and all of your systems are talking to each other, and just having a good system map is helpful when you're doing that.
That is a huge thing. And do you notice too that multiple integrations at once? I mean, do you recommend, so let's just say we need 4 systems. Do you recommend you just go one by one? Like, what would you tell a hotelier that really does need to modernize multiple at once, but you also want to be really careful because of all of the integrations involved and everything like that?
Yeah, I would just make sure, get everybody in the room that is going to be using the systems, because it is doable. It's just you have to be very coordinated, and there
Right.
has to be a really good plan.
Yeah,
So,
which is where experts like you are so worth it because you can come in and you've seen it, you've done it. Tell us, like, when you've come in with you and your team, do you have a success story you can share with us of how you've helped a client do this right and hotelier or hotel group?
well, so recently I was working with a hotel, excuse me, oh my gosh, a hotel company that had been implementing a couple different systems for over a year. Like, it was supposed to only take 4 months,
Wow.
and then it dragged on, and finally management was just like, okay, we're gonna rip the band-aid off and we're going live. But they weren't ready.
Yeah.
It was, and then so they ended up, they were like, we don't have user adoption. Our revenue reconciliations are taking forever. Like, it's not, it doesn't make sense. The data's coming in and it doesn't even match. So it was like, okay, we're gonna stop. Like, just like hold up. And then we just went back and peeled the onion and started with the data and said, okay, what is going on with your data? Because the system should be coming in correctly. So then we looked at the data, and then we found that there were some mapping issues. So
Mm,
we fixed the mapping issues, and then the daily reconciliation piece was doing well. And then we just talked to the different users. And what really the big issue was, which something I already talked about, was the training.
yeah.
So because the implementation had taken a year. Well, the training had been 6 months earlier. So the training was 6 months earlier. So then they went live and they didn't get any additional training. So it's like, well, you're counting on them to remember everything from 6 months
Right.
ago. So then we put together a training plan with the end users. So
Mm.
it was a team effort. So everybody had buy-in. So it's like, okay, you're part of the process. Uh, so we had a training plan, and then they went through the training. The daily reconciliation data was coming over as expected. They weren't spending hours a day on the manual processes. And last I talked to them, they've been, the buy-in is much better. The system's
Good.
working. So
So, moral of the story, include the team.
yeah,
Do it right the first time. Don't skimp on training resources up front, and then you'll have a much better long-term experience. Is that a decent?
yeah, yeah. And
I love
and
it.
I hate to, like, I think I said this today. I was like, I hate to sound like a broken record, but you really do save money in the long run if you
Right.
invest up front.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I mean, clearly it's such a need because you've built a business around it with your expertise. I mean, there's such a need to do this correctly, especially in our ecosystem with all of these systems and interfaces. And it's pretty wild. I mean, it's kind of like the wild, wild west if you
Yeah.
don't have someone like Jody to guide you through, know?
Yeah. Well, and as we have gone, as we've gone through the past few years, we've lost a lot of, like, key talent in
Yeah.
hospitality. We still have a lot of really great people, but we don't have the talent that we did, a few years ago, and we don't have we we don't have the staff.
Yeah.
So we're tasking people who are, who have a day job to do
Right.
the things like the mapping and the data migration, which just it makes it really hard. So
Right.
you spending money on resources, there are a lot of there's a lot of great consultants out there.
Yeah.
Spending money on the resources may seem like a lot at the time, but it really saves your team and helps with your ROI in the long run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's like so many things in life is we don't really want to let go of the dollars up front, but then it ends
Yeah.
up being so much more beneficial in the long run,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And when I was in hotels, I was like the budget queen. So I understand looking at the dollars and being like, oof, like, do we really need to spend that? So
I love it. Yeah, now you're kind of seeing the other side of it too. Well,
yeah.
so if you could give our listeners today just one thing you wish that our industry knew about implementing new tech. I mean, you've given so much. I can't wait to go back
Yeah.
and like post kind of snippets of this because you've given so much. But what would you think would be like the one thing you wish our industry knew when implementing new tech, if they could take it
So
away?
yeah, I wish that they knew that implementations, especially the big ones, are really intense and
Yeah.
need a lot of time allocated
Mm,
to that. Well, they need time and training allocated to them. They're
yeah.
really, really demanding processes.
Right.
And if you don't have the right plan, the right resources, it's going to be difficult. It's
Yeah.
sometimes tech is sold as, oh, you just flip a switch, but it's really not that easy. um, so there's a balance between budgeting and implementation.
Yeah.
And when things are implemented correctly, it's amazing. We have like you said, it's the wild west out there right now. There's so much amazing tech that's coming out that can help us with a lot of the issues that we're facing. But if it's not implemented correctly or the training plan isn't there,
Right.
it can be difficult.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can have, I don't know, I didn't plan to use this analogy, but you can be in a kitchen with all of the best, utensils and
Yeah,
appliances, but if you don't know how to use them, it's not going to do you any
yeah,
good. Right. And so I was off the cuff, but I do think it's so important and such a big topic. And maybe we can even weave in some kind of article from you on our site for our users because we help the hotelier find the tech, but we don't necessarily know how to then help them implement it. So we should talk about that too. But
yeah.
yeah, it's
But it's so funny that you brought up cooking, because so I love cooking, but I always say, like, you can have the best ingredients. You just need to know how to use them.
it's so true. I mean, just like with
Yeah.
anything, all of the books, resources, whatever in the world mean nothing if you don't
Yeah.
properly apply them. So Jody, this has been incredible. We will have this. We're launching a formal Affixify YouTube channel. I say formal because we kind of
Oh, fun.
had it, but it's becoming formal in March. And so when people go back and watch this, they're going to want to get in touch with you. So where can they find Jody? Where can they email you or find you here? We'd love to be able to share how they can contact you.
Yeah, so we have a website, integratedhospitalityconsulting.com.
Okay.
And my LinkedIn page, Jody Jacobson. And then my email is jody.jacobson@integratedhospitalityconsulting.com.
Love it. And we'll put that in the information too on the video. But Jody, thank you so much. You are wonderful to join us today. I'm so excited to continue to collaborate with you guys. And thank you all for joining us. We will be back next Wednesday at 12 Central. We have some awesome guests coming up from vendors to hoteliers to consultants, and we look forward to it. So Jody, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
So
you.
helpful. Thank you. We'll
Thanks.
see everyone next week. Bye.
Bye.